Okay, we're in the middle of Sefiras Haomer, and this week's Parshas Emor is the source of the mitzvah of Sefiras Haomer. Over the past number of years we've had shiurim, we've actually touched upon quite a few Sefiras Haomer topics. Intriguingly enough, few of them are actually on the podcast. I don't know if there were no recordings in the first place, but we had one discussing the Ramban, who says Sefiras Haomer is a mitzvah which is bound by time, and which is not bound by time. A very strange Ramban. We had a whole analysis, and we had a shiur all about why there's no shehechiyanu on Sefiras Haomer. We had a shiur once about the Crusades and the Avelis of Sefiras Haomer. Lots of topics. Today is something new. Not completely new, because some of the arguments have come up in the past concerning other issues, but this particular question is something we have not addressed. And join me in number 2, top left. It's a shayla of the Shaagas Aryeh. Okay? The Shaagas Aryeh of Aryeh Leib Ginsburg, the great Tadir genius, in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, a couple years older. He was a couple years older than the Baal Shem Tov, but he also outlived the Baal Shem Tov by many years, because he lived till the age of 90.
Where he lived?
He was originally a Rav in Volozhin, and while he was in Volozhin, they barely paid him. In fact, Volozhin was not a wealthy town. There wasn't even a shas available. One particular couple who weren't yet zeicha to have children happened to have a shas, and the Shaagas Aryeh knocked on the door and said, "I need 2 volumes." So the husband said, "Usually it's one at a time, but for you, you know, it's like the guy that sells esrogim. For you, do I have your esrog? For you, no idea who you are, but for you." So he told the Shaagas Aryeh, "You can have 2." So the Shaagas Aryeh says that as you have given me 2 Gemaras, the Eibishter should bench you and your wife with 2 kids that will enlighten the world in Torah. And they were Reb Chaim of Volozhin, the famous Chaim Volozhiner, the student of the Gra, and Reb Chaim's brother, Reb Zalman of Volozhin, or known as Zalman of Vilna, who was a tremendous Torah scholar, unbelievable, and Nebuch passed away as a very young man. The Shaagas Aryeh then moved from Volozhin. Apparently he asked for a raise and they couldn't give it to him, and he couldn't live on one, so he said, "I'm out of here." And they said, "All right, go." So they let him go. Then he was in Minsk. He had some hardships there. He was head-to-head with the Rabbi Yechiel Halpern, the author of the Seder Hadoros, incredible historical work, was a huge Torah luminary. And, you know, I guess Minsk just wasn't big enough for the 2 of them together. The Shaagas Aryeh had to leave, but things got messy. And the Shaagas Aryeh literally had to flee. And they say, as he was fleeing on his wagon, he turned around and said, "Minsk isn't burning yet." And from then on, for many years, there were fires, constantly fires in Minsk. The Shaagas Aryeh ultimately makes his way to Metz, which is in France, where they were going to pay him a much nicer salary. B'chlal, in Western Europe, in Germany, France, they knew how to take care of their rabbonim and the mice of the sugar, right, exactly. And the Shaagas Aryeh spent his last 20 or 30 years in Metz. Some say he was there for 20 years. There's an old story, which is he was there for 30 years, and when he came there, they look at him and he was 60 years old. To hire someone at an advanced age in those days, they were like raising their eyebrows. So he got up and said, "Wait a second. The Gemara says a person shouldn't paskin before they're 40. How long does a person live? It says until him shivim shana. So b'chlal, you only usually get 30 years out of a rav. The Eibishter will help and you'll get 30 years out of me." And he passed away at 90. Anyhow, Reb Aryeh Leib Ginsburg, the Shaagas Aryeh, so he has some incredible svarim. The Shaagas Aryeh is one sefer, and he deals with lots of halachic issues that weren't usually dealt with. He deals with lots of the day-to-day shilas, and tzitzis, and tefillin, and kriya shema, and davening. Often the rabbonim of those times were dealing with the Lomdus intricate issues of other parts of Torah, and some of the day-to-day Chaim issues were kind of left behind, and he reawakened an interest in deep halachic analysis in these Seemingly simple issues. And in number 2, he asks a very innocent question, which the answer will be far from simple. But it's an innocent question. Number 2. Someone is eating at night. Okay? Let's assume he davened Ma'ariv early. In the Welt, in Lubavitch, it's uncommon. In the Litvische Welt, it's much more common. In the modern Orthodox Welt, it's almost everywhere that Ma'ariv is davened early after Plag Mincha in the summer. It's hard to wait till it's very late, so you daven Ma'ariv early. The problem is you're Yetzias Ma'ariv, but Kriya Shema, the halacha follows. In the beginning of Masechta Brachos, there's many Tanoim that give different times to say Kriya Shema. By the way, Rabbeinu Tam famously holds that the same way Rabbi Yehuda says you could be Yetzias Ma'ariv from Plag an hour and a quarter before night, so too you could be Yetzias Kriya Shema then as well. But the halacha, most insist you have to wait till it says for Kriya Shema. So if you daven early, you got to make sure before you go to sleep at some point you say the whole Shema, which is one of the reasons in Kriya Shema Lamita we say the whole Shema from Shema till Emes. Just in case we daven Ma'ariv early, you want to get the mitzvah. You want to get the mitzvah. So here's the shayla. Imagine someone davened early. He doesn't even say that's the case, but I'm going to assume. And the guy's eating at night, and then he finishes his meal, and he's like, all right, I have a few mitzvahs in front of me. I got a bench. I got to say Shema. And if it's during this time of the year, I got to count Sefira as well. Because although you're allowed to daven Ma'ariv early, you're allowed to rely on Rabbi Yehuda to daven Ma'ariv from after Plag Mincha. But for Sefiras Haomer, there's a big debate if Rabbi Yehuda allows you to do Sefira early or you have to wait for Sefira. So the minhag by many shuls, by many Fruma shuls is that although they daven Ma'ariv early, they tell you count Sefira later. Do Shema later and do Sefira later, you know? So this guy has 3 mitzvahs in front of him. He says, Va'adayin lo kara kriyish mishal arvis bizmano. It sounds like the guy when he davened Ma'ariv earlier, but he hasn't done it at the right time. He has to wait for Tzeis. Inami, or if it's during the times of Sefira, Adayin lo safar Sefira Summer, he has to do Sefira. So he has Sefiras Haomer to do. He has Shema, and he has to bench. Eizem mehen tiktum, what takes precedence? As far as order of operations, I birchas hamazon koydem lehen, does benching come first? Or yehein koydem le birchas hamazon, or do the other mitzvahs come before benching? This is the well-known question of the Shaagas Aryeh in Siman Chof Aleph, and he divides his discussion into 2 simanim. The first one is Kriya Shema versus benching, and the next one he gets into what if you throw Sefiras Haomer in the mix. So what do you have to take into account in these types of questions? So look at number 1. Number 1 is a well-known Gemara in Shabbos, Tav Chav Gimel. Omar Rava, Pshitali, it's obvious to me. Nebuch, a guy can't scratch 2 pennies together. He can either pay for Ner Beisa, you can either pay for a candle for Shabbos. Ner Beisa, he's Pashut Licht Friday night. Or Ner Chanukah. He doesn't have enough money for both. He's either getting a licht for Shabbos licht or Chanukah licht. It's Friday night Chanukah. He can buy 1 licht. What's he going to do with that licht? Does he use it for Chanukah, which in those days they did b'chlal outside the house, so we wouldn't, or do you light a candle inside for Shabbos? So says Rava ner beisay adif. The Shabbos licht is more important. Mishum shalom beisay, because of shalom bayis. And Rashi explains when it's dark in the house, people fall, they hurt themselves, everyone's in a bad mood, everyone's angry. More important shalom bayis than the Chanukah licht. The Meiri famously says, who lights the Shabbos licht? Your wife. Who lights Chanukah licht? You. So this is really a battle of the bulge between the husband and the wife. He says, shalom bayis is let the wife have her mitzvah. Shalom bayis, let the wife have her mitzvah. She lights the licht inside. Fine. Says Rava, ner beisoy v'kiddush hayom. Another situation. It's Friday evening. You have enough money either for candles or for kiddush hayom. Means wine for kiddush Friday night. What do? Wine for kiddush Friday night or Shabbos candles? So ner beisay adif, your Friday night candles are more important, again because of shalom beisay. Now that din is a big chiddush. The Rishonim ask, the Rashba, the Ran, everybody wants to know in that din of Rava, wait a second. Kiddush Friday night is a mitzvah Deraisa. Zocher es Yom HaShabbos l'kadshay. It's in the Aseres HaDibros. You have to remember Shabbos in order to commemorate it, l'kadshay, to consecrate it. And you do that by words. The mitzvah is to say words. The Chachomim came around and said you should do it ala yayin. You should do it on wine. We'll see some hold yayin is actually biblical. Some hold yayin is Deoraisa. But let's assume yayin is only rabbinic. So the Chachomim though said you have to make Kiddush ala yayin. Fine, but the Kiddush itself is biblical. Whereas the Friday night candles is Stam Derabanan. The Friday night candle is Stam Derabanan. So why, if you would have to choose between one or the other, would you choose the candles? L'chayre, the wine is for the sake of a biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. Kiddush Hayom is a nickname for Shabbos day. Right? It doesn't mean Shabbos day. It means Friday night. Hayom means the day of Shabbos, but the whole 24 hours. Yeah, it's a little misleading. But Hayom, Shabbos is the day. Shabbos Hayom LaHashem. But it refers to Friday night. So the Rashba therefore says, we're talking about the guy's challah. And you can make Kiddush on challah. B'di'evet. Not that Rabbeinu Tam Taka has a problem with making Kiddush on bread, but the halacha follows. The halacha follows almost all the Rishonim who allow you to make Kiddush on bread. Elamai, wine is better than bread. So the Rashba says that the Ravas, the question he's raising is, you lechatchila want to make Kiddush on wine. Plan B is you have challah. But you don't have licht. So the licht is more important than getting the Kiddush on the wine, because you could still do Kiddush on challah. The Ran quotes from Rabbeinu Yonason, the Rishon Rabbeinu Yonason, who says, no, the guy here doesn't have challah, doesn't have wine either. But the mitzvah of Kiddush, you actually yotz in shul when you daven Ma'ariv. During Shmoneh Esrei Friday night, you make a bracha in the middle called Mekudash Shabbos. Those words fulfill the biblical obligation of making Kiddush Friday night. Zocher es Yom HaShabbos, how do you commemorate? B'dvarim, with words. That's all the Torah mandates. The fact that you need wine says it must be Derabanan. The fact that you would need to make Kiddush b'makom suda is also Derabanan. It's all rabbinic. This guy has nothing. He has no wine. He has no challah. But the whole bracha of Kiddush he's going to be making at home is a Derabanan. The mitzvah he was ready when he davened Ma'ariv, whether he davened in shul or at home. But the bracha of Kiddush is only Derabanan. So it could be he has nothing, no wine, no challah, and he's going to forfeit the bracha of Kiddush too. But it's only Derabanan. It's important, but if it's a choice between that and the candles of Shabbos, it's Ner Shabbos. But what do you see both from the Rashba and Rabbi Yonason? That had it been a Deoraisa versus a Derabanan, there would be, Rabbi wouldn't say what he said. If it would be a question of choosing either a Deoraisa or a Derabanan, the Deoraisa would definitely take precedence. They both say it happens to be here, there's no Deoraisa. According to the Rashba, you have challah for the Kiddush. It's only a rabbinic preference to have wine. We cast that away to have candles. According to Rabbi Yonason, when you daven Ma'ariv, you're Yetzias Kiddush. The whole bracha you're going to make by the meal, the Kiddush bracha, is a Derabanan. There's no Deoraisa anymore. So it could be the guy has no challah, nothing. We're still going to cast that aside for the sake of the candles. Fine. Let's just finish off. Boy, Rava asked, wait a second. So, Ner Chanukah loses to Ner Beisai. Kiddush also loses to Ner Beisai. The candle Friday night trumps. But what about the two runner-ups? What about Chanukah Licht or Kiddush? Boy, Rava, what about Ner Chanukah v'Kiddush Hayom? What if you have your licht for Friday night, but now it's a Shaila Chanukah candle or wine for Kiddush? They're both Derabanan. See, according to the Rashba, you already have bread, so the Shaila here is only to upgrade from bread to wine. According to Rabbi Yonason, it's a much bigger question. You have nothing. It's for the whole brach of Kiddush. It's a different question. But nonetheless, what do I say? Kiddush Hayom Adif to Tadir. Is Kiddush wine better because it's Tadir? Every Friday night you make Kiddush. Sefiras Haomer. Although how many Shabbosim are there in a year? What am I talking about? Sefiras? I'm sorry, Chanukah. Exactly. Thank you. Chanukah. It's only at that. Or Dilma, or maybe Ner Chanukah Adif. Maybe you should get the Ner Chanukah Mishum Pirsumenis. Chanukah is Mefarsim, a miracle. So here you have a classical case where we're trying to work out the priority of mitzvahs. Each one has something going for them. Tadir is an important one. The Gemara learns out from a pasuk in Parshas Pinchas about the musafim of Pesach. It says you should bring the musafim, the extra karbonos of Pesach, milvad oilas habayker, in addition to the constant oil that was brought every morning, which means after. And then the pasuk says asher la'oilas hatomit. The Gemara understands that to be saying, the pasuk is teaching you like this. Do you know why the musaf comes after the morning one? Asher la'oilas hatomit, because it's constant. We learn out from there, whenever, you have someone that comes to your house every Friday night, and 1 week, there's another guest. Who's going to walk into your house first? The Tadir, the guy that comes, the frequent guy. Tadir ve'ena Tadir should come first. Here, what? That's the source. Well, not the Friday night case, but not the two guests. Yeah. But here's the thing. When the Gemara usually speaks about Tadir, it's when you're going to do both mitzvahs, the shail is order of operations. Like the Karbanis, I have the daily Talmud, I have a Musaf for Yom Tov, for Shabbos, for Chodesh, so order of operations. Here, Rav is using it to choose between one or the other. Order of operations is called Kedima, what you're maktim, what prefaces what. This is a case of Dechiyah, where you have to choose between one or the other. But Rav still uses Tadir, that Tadir is an argument to be laid on the table that you should use the money for wine. On the other hand, Chanukah is Pirsumei Nisa. So Basar Diba Yahada Pashta, after he asked the question, he solved it. He says, Ner Chanukah Adif Mishum Pirsumei Nisa. Pirsumei Nisa trumps Tadir. Better spend the money on Ner Chanukah and lose out the wine, which is interesting. According to the Rashba, again, all you're losing is the wine. You still have your challah. According to Rabbi Yonasan, it means you're not going to be making that bracha of Kiddush that night. You don't. So it's interesting to know, just to point out, when we're discussing a shaila of kedima, when you're going to do both, and the shaila is what comes first and what comes second, it's a different question when you have to choose of A over B. An example. It's Shabbos, Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh Tevis, Chanukah, it's Shabbos. What do you do? Yeah, 3 Sefer Torah. 3 Sefer Torah. What's the order of reading? First you do Shabbos, then you do Rosh Chodesh, then Chanukah. Whatever's more Tadir, that's the order. Which Haftarah do you use? Chanukah. And the Magen Avraham explains, when it comes to choosing the order, Tadir is better than Pirsumei Nisa. When it comes to choosing one over the other, Pirsumei Nisa is stronger than Tadir.
Right here?
Right. So it's, in other words, it's not the same question. Order of events, you're going to read Rosh Chodesh before Chanukah. Chanukah has Pirsumei Nisa, but I'm going to get there. So then Tadir is a stronger logic. But Haftarah, you're only reading one. Then Pirsumei Nisa outweighs Tadir. It's interesting, that's what the Magen Avraham says. And you see that over here. Rava put Tadir, Pirsumei Nisa on the table. Pirsumei Nisa trumps because you're choosing one over the other. Order of operations, Tadir would be stronger. Fine. So, but you see from number one, from the Rashba and Rabbi Yonasan that I quoted, that if you have to choose between a Deraisa and a Derabanan, the Deraisa for sure would rule. So, if Kiddush would have been biblical, according to the Rashba, if you wouldn't have Challah, or according to Rabbi Yonasan, if you wouldn't be Yotze in Ma'ariv, then Rava would not have said what he said. Kiddush would trump. When you have to choose between a Deraisa, Derabanan, the Deraisa trumps. The Shail is, if you're doing both anyways, does the Deraisa have precedence? Like I mentioned, precedence is not the same Shail as choosing one or the other. If you only have enough cash for Shabbos licht or Chanukah licht, the Gemara that says clearly, you choose Shabbos licht. But Friday night Chanukah, what do you light first? You light Chanukah licht. Right? Now there's taka for a reason. If you do Shabbos licht first, it might be too late. But you see that the order of operations when you're doing both is not the same discussion as choosing one over the other. It's two completely different discussions. When it comes to Deraisa versus Derabanan, if you have to choose one over the other, the Deraisa for sure trumps. The shaila is, what about an order of operations? And that's what we're really going to analyze over here. By order of operations, does a Deraisa inherently come before Derabanan? Whenever you have two mitzvahs to do, one's Derabanan, one's Deraisa, do I say automatically the Deraisa comes first? The Mishnah in Masechtas Zvachim says a rule. It's talking about karbonis. If you have two different karbonis in front of you and you're not sure which one to offer first, Kol Mekudash Mechavere, anything which is holier than its friend, Koidim Lechavere comes first. There's another rule of Kol Tadir. The Mishnah mentions both. And two different mitzvahs, one is more frequent than the other. Every day it applies Talis and Tefillin. The Alter Rebbe quotes from the Nemuki Yosef that you do Talis first because Talis is Tadir, you do it every single day. You do it every day. Tefillin you don't. Shabbos, Yom Tov. We once had a whole shir about that, but the Tefillin biblically applies at night, and Talis, according to the Rambam, doesn't. We had a whole shir about that once. But Tadir ve'ena Tadir applies everywhere. The Gemara, it begins as a topic by Karbonis, but it goes everywhere. The Gemara in Brachas discusses Mincha and Musaf. The Gemara says if you're in the afternoon and you have two tefillas to daven, Mincha and Musaf, the Chachamim say that you're supposed to do Mincha first, because it's Tadir. Mincha is every day. If you have two tefillas, Mincha and Musaf, it's clear, it's a Braisa. Chachamim say Mincha comes first because it's Tadir, and Musaf is not. Okay, Tosfos is a big machlokes. Really? We don't usually do that. When does that apply? Some Rishonim holds it's really supposed to be the modus operandi consistently. Musaf should take a back step. Tosfos says no. It's talking about, let's say it's Sefira, it's 2 p.m. on Rosh Chodesh or Shabbos, and you're about to go into a big celebration that's going to take you all the way till nighttime. So you have to do Mincha Musaf right now. So then you do Mincha first. But if you know you'll have time later to do Mincha, you do Musaf now. That's Tosfos' opinion. So that's why it doesn't usually apply. It's only talking about a case where right now it's Mincha Musaf, and you know that between now and the end of the day you're not going to have another opportunity.
Why can't you say that to the Shaagas Aryeh? I'm eating a meal now.
No, you finished the meal. You finished the meal.
You finished the meal. I finished the meal. Let me bench. It's not, the night's not ending. You
also have time. You have plenty of time to bench too. You have plenty of time to bench too.
Yeah, but
I will tell you. I will tell you now that you're challenging. I will tell you. The Brais in Masechta Brachos brings a debate between Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim say that Musaf should come before Mincha should come before Musaf because it's Tadir. Rabbi Yehuda holds you can only daven Musaf till the 7th hour of the day, 1 hour past Chatzos. Let's say Chatzos is 12 o'clock. A day is from 6 to 6 for argument's sake. Till 1 o'clock p.m. you could daven Musaf. When could you start davening Mincha? A half hour after Chatzos. So in our case, if it'll be 12:30, right? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, this whole question of is only applies in a half hour window. Rabbi Yehuda says you better do Musaf first, because Mincha you have a whole day. Rabbi Yehuda says, I know Mincha is Tadir, but you can't afford to do Mincha first because you might lose your Musaf. He said it's a mitzvah Averis. Musaf is a mitzvah Averis, the clock's ticking. Mincha you have a whole day. Chacham say no, we believe you have a whole day for Musaf as well, and because they hold you could also do Musaf till the evening. So therefore they say you choose Mincha over Musaf. But Rabbi Yehuda says mitzvah Averis, if the clock is ticking, that outweighs Tadir. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Come to the case over here of the Shaagas Aryeh. It's nighttime, you're in middle of your Suda, or you ended the Suda, you have to bench, say Shema, Sefira. How long do you have to bench? Let's say you have 72 minutes. You have 4 mil. Some say a mil is 22 and a half minutes or 24 minutes. If it's 24 minutes, it gives you 96 minutes. But still, you have many hours seemingly for Shema and Sefira. Would you apply Rabbi Yehuda's logic that whatever's going to end sooner needs to be taken care of first? Shaagas Aryeh doesn't mention that. I guess he would say, listen, it's a big difference. A half hour when it's 12:30, you only have a half hour. If you're going to do Mincha first, you may miss out Musaf. If you have 72 minutes to bench, you're not going to lose it by saying it's not. Time isn't there. It's right. The urgency hasn't reached. It's not alarming. It hasn't reached max. But what you would take into account the chayra is tadir, and when it comes to benching and kriyishim, imagine like this. How many times do you say kriyishim every day? 2 times. Every day of the year, 700 times. Birchas hamazon. How often do you bench? So some people wash 5 times a day, right? Some doctors are saying you need to have more meals. 3 aren't enough. You have to have 5, 6 meals during the day, smaller. Other doctors are saying fakert, have 1 big meal at 1 p.m. and don't eat. There's every theory you want, you'll find it out there. And the truth is, each method some methods are better for weight loss, some are better for weight gain. Each one has it. Some are better for sleep, other digestive. Each method has its pros and its cons. But how often does someone bench? There's no telling. You could bench thousands of times a year, much more often than Kriyishma. On the other hand, you can also get away with barely benching at all. Right. Just Shabbos, a few times Shabbos, Yom Tov. So, which one is more tadir? Let's take Sefiras Haomer out for a second. Kriyishma and benching, which is more tadir? Kriyishma is every day, twice a day, you can't shirk off the responsibility. Mm-hmm. Benching could be thousands of times, could just be 100, 200 throughout the year. What? Right. So, how do you judge tadir?
Yeah, but if Tadir was such a strong thing,
so you would think it's requirement.
Sorry, you would have never stuck Sefiras Emor.
Wait,
that's a clear Tadir loser.
Yeah, but seriously, hold on. Oh, but maybe it wins for another. Hold on.
I agree, maybe it wins for another reason, but it can't be this.
So he discusses. Hold on. No, so he discusses Tadir, and he says like this: there's a Gemara in Zvachim. I couldn't get it on the page. Very important. This is one of the classical questions that the Gemara asks, but doesn't come to a resolution. On the one hand, I have a rule: if you have 2 things in front of you and one is more tadir, it comes first. I also have a rule: whatever's holier, kol ha-Mekudash mechavera, comes first. What if one item is more frequent, tadir, the other one is holier? Tadir versus Mekudash. So the Gemara in Zvachim actually tries to solve it from here, from there, from somewhere else. Ultimately, it ends up stalemate. The Rambam Taka Paskins in the laws of Karbonis that if a kohen ever has that dilemma, he has 2 things in front of him, one is holier, one is more frequent, then he can choose. Eiz in the Beis HaMikdash, like by Karbonis, if there's ever Eiz mehen sheyirtze yaktim, whatever you want, you can do first. The Rambam holds you could choose. Because the Gemara ends up in a stalemate. Intriguingly, and this is actually going to come up soon, the Bar Tanura, Rabbi Vadia of Bar Tanura, who was in the 1400s, so he's like in between the Rishonim and the Achronim, lives in Italy. I'm sure he's very proud of the wine. Right? So, some people were Zoicha. Rashi was Zoicha to have that wine. You have the Rif has the Alfas wine.
Rekanati.
Right, and the Rekan, exactly. And then you have the Bar Tanura. The Rambam, somehow the Rambam also has that sweet wine. Somebody once asked me, how come the Chassam Sofer doesn't have a wine? I said, fakert, the Hechsher on all the wines is called the Chassam Sofer. He's the Machshir on the wines. So the Bar Tanura writes, in his commentary to Mishnayos on Zvachim, the Gemara Taka asked the question, Tadir versus Mekudash. He says, I believe Tadir comes first. The Gemara ends up with a stalemate, says about Tanura, it seems to me Tadir wins. The Tosfos Yom Tov, who was a student of the Maharal, who was in Prague, and then he was in Krakow, the end of his life, passed away in the 1650s. The Tosfos Yom Tov, who wrote the Maharal B'chal Kocht in Mishnayos, the Maharal wanted to bring everyone back to the basics. When the Maharal was younger, he went to yeshiva, Polish yeshiva, which was well known for its pulpulim. There were thumbs flying across the room, and they're being mafalful and building ideas and theories and creating arguments. And later on in life, the Maharal repelled that way of learning. It's a waste of time. He says no one knows any information. Everyone knows how to argue, but no one knows actually any dinim, any hardcore information. The Maharal wrote about this in many of his Sefirim, and you could hear him crying. The Maharal says, these are the sins of my youth, the way I used to learn when I was a Bach. And he says, my tshuva is that now I'm making a shturim, and I'm persuading the new generation not to learn the way I learned. That's my tshuva. And the Maharal wanted to bring people back to the basics. Part of that is to koch in Mishnayos. So his own student, the Yetzias Yomtov, wrote a deep work on Mishnayos. Don't think Mishnayos is a waste of time. You could spend your time analyzing Mishnayos. So the Yetzias Yomtov says, exactly. Well, the Yetzias Yomtov challenges the Bartanura. He says, why would the Bartanura say that Tadir comes first? So the Yetzias Yomtov throws out the following idea. The Gemara in Zvachim asks, how do I know Tadir comes before Eino Tadir? And it brings the Pasuk in Pinchas about the Karbanos. The Musaf comes after the morning, Asher la'olas atom, because the morning is constant. When the Gemara discusses Mekudash, the Gemara never asks, where's the Pasuk? The Gemara never says that.
Interesting.
So it sounds like it's a Sevara, or if it's based on a Pasuk, it's not an outright Pasuk. So therefore the Yetzias Yomtov says, since Tadir is clearer in the Chumash, it trumps over Mekudash. But said the Yetzias Yomtov, I'm still wondering if the Gemara end up with a stalemate, how does the Bartanura take upon his shoulders to solve what the Gemara didn't solve? The Taz, the David Halevi Segel, who was same time as the Yetzias Yomtov, he says a similar thing. He feels that ultimately Tadir comes first for the same argument, because Tadir is based on a clear pasuk in the Chumash, and Mekudash isn't. Comes the Shaagas Aryeh, not in this simon, a different simon, the simon Chav Ches. He says, what's the Taz talking about? The Gemara in Zvachim Taka only brings a pasuk for Tadir, not for Mekudash. But there's a Gemara in Harius that brings a pasuk from Mekudash. It's from Vikidashtoi, by the Kohen, that you should be Mekudash the Kohen, and that means to make him go first in everything. You see from that pasuk that something which is holy goes first. We learn it from the Kohen, from Vikidashtoi. The Gemara there is talking about if you can only redeem, right, one Yid, who do you choose? The Talmud Chacham first, the Kohen first. There's an order of priorities, right? Who are you going to choose first? And we know that Kol HaMekudash comes, brings a pasuk, so that the Shaagas Aryeh is like, there's a pasuk in the Chumash for Kol HaMekudash as well. What's the Taz talking about? What's the Yetzias Yomtov talking about? What's the Bartanura talking about? So the Shaagas Aryeh says, and Bechlal, all of them apparently forgot the Rambam I mentioned. The Rambam passions clearly you could choose. The Rambam says you could choose, and then you have the Bartanura, the Yetzias Yomtov, the Taz, all leaning towards Tadir. The Chida, in his Sefer Birkei Yosef, gets involved in the argument, and he says, whoa. There's another Gemara everyone forgot about. It's in Menachos. The Gemara in Menachos also raised the question of Mekudash versus Tadir. It's not in the same length that it is in Zvachim, which is the source of the discussion. It's brought, by the way, in Menachos. The Gemara there is talking Menachos, if it's Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash, you need 4 animals, 2 for the constant, the morning and the afternoon, the Tmidim, and 2 for the Musaf. The problem is there's no more lambs in Jerusalem. You're not going to have for Sunday Tmidim. Only on Monday there's new lambs coming. The question is, so I have 4 here on Shabbos. Should I use 2 for the Tmidim of Shabbos and the other 2 for tomorrow's Tmidim, the morning and afternoon of Sunday? Or should I use those other 2 for today's Musaf? And the Gemara says, the Shabbos Karbanos are Mekudash, but the Sunday Karbanos are Tmidim, they're constant. So the Gemara says it's a Shiloh of Mekudash versus Tadir. Now it also happens to be one of them is today. So that's the famous debate of the Radvaz and the Chacham Tzvi. The Chacham Tzvi is a well-known shuvah and discussing this Gemara. Why don't we throw that in the mix? That you ain't ma'virin ala mitzvahs, you're going to deal with the moment. Let's not get into there. We actually had a shir about it once. But the Gemara looks at it as a Shiloh of Mekudash versus Tadir. Do I use the extra 2 for the Musafim of Shabbos? Shabbos Karbanos, it's Mekudash, it's Musaf. Or do I use them for tomorrow, Tmidim? Now this is not a Shiloh of what comes first, it's a Shiloh of choosing. Remember, we said in the beginning, the key is, it's not always the same. When it comes to choosing, there's different mechanisms at work than when it comes to one before the other. But according, what? I'll get in just a moment.
One the chiyuv, one not.
Right. So, according to one version of the Gemara over there, there's a shaila what the correct version is. According to one version, it says that the animals are kept for Sunday. So says the Chidah, everyone in their discussion apparently forgot that Gemara in Menachos. It's not the main, in the main arena of the Sugi and Zvachim, they're going to end up with stalemate. But you have this one line in Menachos which says that no, Tadir comes first. So the Chidah goes with the Bartanura, and he goes with the Taz, that Tadir comes first because of that Gemara. But the Shaagas Aryeh goes with the Rambam, who said you could choose. Unless the Chidah is saying the Rambam forgot the Gemara in Menachos, but I said there's different versions there, so it's not. And also, if the Gemara in Menachos is a one-liner, in Zvachim is the main sugi. If in the main sugi you end up with a suffix, so then maybe that wins over the smaller rayas you bring from elsewhere. Anyway, so that remains a big question, fascinating. When it comes to talis and tefillin, the Ritva brings people that say tefillin comes first before talis, because tefillin is Mekudash. It has the Eibishter's name, right? The tefillin is Mekudash compared. Tefillin is Tashmishe Kedusha. Can't throw it out. Tzitzis could be thrown out technically.
Versus if you have a four.
In addition, that's a very good argument. You b'chlal don't have to wear talis, only if you have four corners. So the Shaagas Aryeh in Siman Chav Ches goes to town in that whole discussion about talis versus tefillin. Some Rishonim said talis comes first because it's Tadir. Others say tefillin comes first because it's Mekudash. It's mamash this very question. Some wanted to say tefillin is really Tadir because Minat Torah it's every night. Right. It's just Chacham said don't do because you might fall asleep. Whereas talis, according to the Rambam and many others, at night when you can't see, there's no reason. The Shaagas Aryeh has a whole simon, and I want to tell you, he attacks every rishon he could find, and he pretty much throws them all out the window. And he comes up with a shita you could choose between talis and tefillin.
Rambam.
You could choose. He goes with the argument that you b'chal don't have to wear talis. So talis compared to tefillin, it's like blowing your nose. I have a shayla. I have to say Krishma, I also have to blow my nose. So Krishma, do I have to Tadir, Krishma is Deraisa? There's no such question. Only when two things are in the same arena is there an order of operations. When one thing is completely insignificant, it doesn't bear it. He says, since talis is optional, it doesn't even enter the arena of tefillin. Therefore, you could do it first. It's not a problem.
Do talis.
Yeah, because it's like blowing your nose before you. and anyhow, so back to our shiloh over here. So when it comes to we're done with them. We're going to move now. Now that all the introductions, we're going to go fast. Kriyishma versus Birchas Hamazon. Okay, we'll get to Sefiras soon. Kriyishma versus Birchas Hamazon. So when the Gemara in Zvachim is discussing Mekudash versus Tadir, it brings the following case. You're a kohen in the Beis HaMikdash. There's lots of flesh that has to be eaten. You have in front of you a korban shlomim that was brought yesterday. Shlomim could be eaten for day, night, and the following day. So you only have the end of today till Shkia to eat the shlomim. But there's also a korban chatas that needs to be eaten. Now for that you have today and tonight. So the Mishnah says, Rab Meir says, yesterday's shlomim takes precedence because you only have till sundown. In addition, it's been waiting here for a while. The chutzpah to ignore it, it's zilus, it's embarrassing. But says the Gemara, what if they were all from today? What if the shlomim is from today? You're the kind, there's meat in front of you. There's shlomim meat, which is kodshim kalim, it's lighter kodshim, can be eaten throughout Jerusalem. And you have the chatas meat, which is kodshe kodshim, can only be eaten in the Azara. You have to choose the holier one first. But says the Gemara, shlomim is more frequent. Whenever someone wants to bring a shlomim, if you make a neder, a vow, I'll bring a shlomim. Chat is only if someone accidentally eats chaylev or some break Shabbos or this or that. And yet you see that if they're both today, the chatas comes first. That shows something which is holy trumps something which is frequent. So the Gemara says, no, shlomim is not frequent. And the Gemara says a magical word. Shlomim is not tadir, it's matzui. It happens to be found. It's not an obligation. Yeah, once you take a vow upon yourself, you have to bring it, but who asked you to take the vow? So it's matzui. It's a word of Rava. Rava said it's matzui. So I don't care if it's found 1,000 times a day. It never has to be here. So it's not. It doesn't have the mile of Tadir. So the Gemara said, of course, the chatas would come first. It's Mekudash, and the shlom is b'chlal not Tadir. It's matzui. Tadir means you have to do it. Oh, if you have to do it, that's the big shaila of Tadir versus Mekudash. That's the big shaila. But shalomim would be matzui. So the Shaagas says, so too benching. Someone decides to eat 5 times a day. Yeah, once you eat, you have to bench. But who said you have to eat? It's like taking the vow. It's mamash analogous to the vow. Once you take the vow, you got to bring the shalomim. But there I did get better. Who asked you to take the vow? So he says you'll apply Rava's logic as well. Benching, it's like you mentioned off the bat, benching is not really Tadir. It happens, it's happenstance. It happens to be, it could be people are benching all the time. It's much more frequent than Kriyishma. But it just happens, it's motzu, it's found. It's not, it doesn't have to be, there's not Tadir.
If it's a Sudas mitzvah.
But that's not twice a day. Kriyishma is twice a day. So Kriyishma is Tadir. So the Shaagas Aryeh ends up saying Kriyishma has to come before Birchas Hamazon. Because Birchas Hamazon only has to be 200 times a year. I don't know. With all the Shabbosim, throw in Shalashudas, right? Yom Tov, say you have to wash Chol Hamoed, whatever. You're not going to get that much. But Kriyishma twice a day. Kriyishma is good. That's how he solves that.
Yeah, but that's taking it out of the Tadir. There's 2 things going on. There's 2 we're talking about. One is a procedural issue, and one is a substance issue. Like what Rav was talking about in the original Gemara, we learned that substance, if you have the substance of Tadir and the substance of, let's say, Presuma Nisa, when you're talking about substance, that's really the secondary issue of what Tadir is. Tadir is mostly a procedural, like you said, when it's always...
We're talking about a procedure here. Should I bench first?
Shaagas is taking it out of the procedural issue. He's saying Tadir he's taking it out. He's saying, because you don't even have to bench. You're not in the procedural.
No. The guy has to bench now because he ate. No, it's analogous.
You have to bench, so it's not a Tadir issue.
Right, no. In other words,
to go and bench,
exactly. So
like
Kriyishma and Birchas Hamazon is exactly analogous to when you have the chatos in front of you or the shlomim.
Right.
Where the Gemara says the chatos is Mekudash, it trumps. The shlomim could be much more often, but it doesn't have to be there.
That's why
it's not Tadir.
So
too over here. So therefore, the Tadiris of Birchas Hamazon is weak. It just happenstance. Yeah. And whereas Kriyishma, as a real Tadiris, it's twice a day, you can't shirk it off. So it overpowers. The question is, he gets into his next one about Sefiras Haomer. What do you do about Sefiras Haomer? Throw Sefiras Haomer in the mix. Kriyishma will definitely trump Sefiras Haomer. Kriyishma is Deraisa, it's Tadir for sure. The shaila is Sefiras Haomer or benching. What do you do first? So Kriyishma is going to come first because it beats Birchas Hamazon. It'll for sure beat Sefira. Sefira is only 49 times a year. Birchas Hamazon, watching at least twice on Shabbos, gets you over 100, right? But Kriyishma is 700. So Kriyishma is for sure first. The shaila is Birchas Hamazon or Sefira. What do you do first? Sefira is only 49 times a year. Birchas Hamazon is, you have to bench much more than that. Just take Shabbosim into account. In addition, Birchas Hamazon is Deoraisa. So you would think it's a no-brainer. You would think Birchas Hamazon should come first.
My point is that the fact that he even asked this question proves you're not talking about a procedural Tadir. Because he can't be. It's not even a question. Sefira's out the door. Sefira loses.
But maybe there's other things to take into account. Hold on.
Like
so the real question over here is, does Birchas Hamazon Bechlal come before Sefira because it's Deraisa? When you're doing 2 mitzvahs, does a Deraisa inherently come before a Derabanan? If you have to choose between one and the other, we saw right away in number 1 that all the Rishonim said if you have to choose between one, the Deraisa will always come first. If Kiddush would have been Deraisa, it would have for sure trumped the candle Friday night. If you have to choose between one or the other, Deraisa takes precedence. But if it's an order of operations, do I say a Deraisa inherently comes before a Derabanan? So you would think l'chayra, if anything which is holy or kol ha-Mekudash comes first, a Deraisa is for sure Mekudash from a Derabanan. So here's where we enter a fascinating debate. And we're going to have the Shaagas Aryeh on one side, the Pnei Yoshua completely the other side, And in the middle, we're going to have the Noidu B'Yehudan and Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Okay, so 4 of the greatest minds from 300 years ago. The Pnei Yeshu was the oldest amongst them. The Pnei Yeshu was the Rebbe of the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid learned Nigla under the Pnei Yeshua when he lived in Lvov. The Pnei Yeshua also left Lvov and he also went west, maybe for a better salary. He was in Frankfurt, although he had the Balabatim gave him a very hard time over there. But the Pnei Yeshua was buried in Frankfurt.
Right.
So Pnei Yeshua was the oldest of the group. Then was the Shaagas Aryeh, about 15 years younger. Then there was the Noidu B'Yehuda, and after him Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And all of them get involved in this very question. So there's a Gemara Masechta Brachas you have to know, and that's where the whole Machlokes is Soiva V'Hoilech. It's a Gemara, a big debate of Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai. Friday night. You're holding your becher. You have to make 2 brachas. Spoile, Pri, Agafen, and the bracha of Kiddush, Mekudash Shabbos. What comes first? Well, we do like Beis Hillel, Yain, and then the bracha of Kiddush. Beis Shammai says you flip it. Beis Shammai says you flip it. Why does Beis Shammai say you flip it? Beis Shammai gave 2 reasons. Number 1, says Beis Shammai, why Bechlal do you have a cup of wine over here? Why are you making a hagefen? In order to sanctify Shabbos. It's the Shabbos which brings the wine over here. The only reason you have the wine is because you want to sanctify Shabbos, right? So Shabbos comes first. In addition, number 2, says Beis Shammai, the moment it became Shabbos, you had a chiyuv to make a bracha Mekudash Shabbos. The bracha al hagefen is only when the wine comes. So since in time, Shabbos comes to you before the wine comes to you, so when you have them both in front of you, the Shabbos comes first. Which, by the way, many have a notion, whenever you have 2 mitzvahs in front of you, there's a bit of a gut feeling that whichever mitzvah started earlier has a precedence. If you have 2 mitzvahs in front of you, and one of them you had to be chayiv, one of them you're chayiv in only a half hour, the other one you're chayiv from yesterday. There's a bit of a gut feeling the one that you're chayiv from before should come first. For example, when you have a fruit and you want to make a shechionu and ha'etz, so there's a big debate which bracha comes first. And one of the reasons to make the shechionu first is because the shechionu you were already chayiv when you saw the fruit on the tree. The eitz you only chayiv when you want to eat it. So now that you have the fruit and you're doing both brachas, the shechionu comes first because you were chayiv earlier. So Beis Shammai seems to be saying a similar thing over here. When you come and you're holding that wine, the bracha of Kiddush you already owe the moment Shabbos came in. The wine only began now. Those are the 2 arguments of Beis Shammai.
Does hefsek play a role?
L'chayr, neither would be a hefsek. Either way, it's just as good. What? I hear you. According to Beis Shammai, you go straight from the wine to the drinking. I hear. Beis Hillel counters, and so I have 2 arguments for Yayin to go first. He says, number 1, the only way you could make Kiddush is by having that cup, right? In order to make the bracha mekad by your table Friday night, you have to have a cup of wine. Or bread, but you have to have something. So since the only way to get to the Kiddush is through the wine comes first. Number 2, says Beis Hillel, Tadir. Wine. Mekudash Shabbos is once a week. Wine is Tadir. It's always. Now why is wine Tadir? The chayr is only motzah. You happen to drink wine. When do you have to? So they always no. Wine is often. First of all, it's every Friday night as well. Whenever you make Kiddush, it's Shabbos day. It's Havdalah. It's if birchas hamazon ala kos, weddings. It's definitely more than the Mekudash Shabbos, because every Mekudash Shabbos has wine. Plus, there are other times you need wine. So Beis Hillel says, since the brach of al bir gofen is more tadir comes first. That's Beis Hillel's argument. So all of these big people we mentioned, the Shaagas Aryeh, the Noidu B'Yehuda, the Pnei Shul, all that's, wait a second. Let's throw something else in the mix. The brach of Mekudash HaShabbos is biblical. The brach of Mekudash HaShabbos is biblical. You have a mitzvah in Torah to make Kiddush. So you're going to say you were Yotze in the Shul. Okay, but if you don't say that, we're putting Ma'ariv aside. Let's say the guy didn't do Ma'ariv yet. When you make Kiddush, the Mekudash HaShabbos is a biblical mitzvah. Zachar Shem HaShabbos. The wine is not. Halachically, making kiddush al yayin is Derabanan. Some believe wine is biblical. There are some. Rab Kloinimus Ish Roimi. There was a fellow, Rab Kloinimus Ish Roimi, came from Rome. At the end of his life, he moved to Magenza, to Mainz, in Germany. I think it was Mainz. And the Rashi writes in Masechta Beya, I just heard that Rab Kloinimus came from Rome to Germany, and Rashi is very excited. Unfortunately, Rab Kloinimus was killed in 1096 in the First Crusade. He was murdered. But this Rab Kloinimus, the Rishonim quote, held wine is biblical. Not the drinking of the wine, but to make the bracha ala yain. The Pashi, you don't have to drink it. But to make it ala yain is Deraisa. And he's not the only one. There's Rabbeinu Chananel who holds it. Toisus mentioned such a possibility. There are some that believe biblically you have to have wine. So according to them, there's no way you're Yetzias Shul. You're not holding a cup of wine. The prevalent opinion is wine is just Derabanan. That's the 90% of Rishonim hold wine is just Derabanan. But if the guy hasn't daven Ma'ariv yet, then the bracha though, Mekudash Shabbos is Deraisa. So how come Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, how come no one mentions that you know why you should do Mekudash Shabbos first? It's biblical. That's the shaila everybody asks. Everybody asks. So join me in number 4, the Pnei Yeshua. We'll do this quick. The Pnei Yeshua asks on that Gemara. Look at the second line of number 4. Umasikna b'Gemara, the Gemara in Brachas has a conclusion. The Iker time of Beis Hillel. You know why Beis Hillel says Yayin is first? Mishum de Tadir, ve'ena Tadir is first. And more often you make ala gefen. But he said, wait a second, Afagav Kiddush Hayom Deraisa. The bracha Mekudash Shabbos is biblical. It's brought in Perek Mishemeis and Brachas. It's brought in Arvei Psachim. And he quotes Toisus in Psachim and in Nazir, the Afilu Hachim Masha Mekadshon ala Yayin Huma Derabanan. That the wine is rabbinic, but the actual bracha is biblical. You have to make, right? Making the Kiddush bracha, the words of sanctification are biblical. He says, Ubechol duchta mashma, says the Pnei Yeshua, everywhere. It's mashma, bepshitus, as a fact, de la'olam yesh lahaktim deraisa. Deraisa always comes first. Ein mashkichin b'midi de tadir. I don't care what's tadir. The Pnei Yeshua holds, if one mitzvah is deraisa, and the other one is Derabanan, even though it's tadir, the deraisa comes first. That's his opinion. I said before the Chur, the Deraisa should come first because it's Mekudash. That would be different. Because if the Deraisa is only Mekudash versus the Rabbinic, but the Rabbanon is Tadir, then you go back to the whole tug of war between Tadir versus Mekudash. The Pnei is jumping ahead. He says, nah. The Deraisa B'chlal is on a different level playing field than the Derabanan. I don't care how Tadir the Rabbanan is. The Deraisa will come first no matter what. So he wants to know, what's Beis Hillel talking about? Mekudash Shabbos has to come first. And he says, V'oid, afluf, even what Toisus is unsure about, that maybe Kiddush al Yayin Nami Deraisa, even though Toisus says maybe Minat Torah you have to hold the wine, Toisus mentions a possibility. Biblically, you have to be holding that wine, which would mean you're not Yetzias Shul. Afilu hachi, the bracha on the wine before is Derabanan. The Ber Pri Gefen is definitely Derabanan. Even if Minat Torah, you have to be holding the cup of wine, but the bracha Ber Pri Gefen is definitely Derabanan. So I don't care if it's more Tadir. The buck should stop at the fact that the Kiddush is Deraisa. He says, Elanir, you have to say, this, that Kiddush is biblical, lav b'seder Kiddush ala shulchan dafka. It's not talking about by your meal. El afilu b'Kiddush b'seichat tefillah nami yotze. He says, it must be we're talking about the guy daven ma'ariv already. And he was yotze when you make the bracha Mekudash HaShabbos Shmoneh Esrei. Elo midrabanan tiknu, you should go back with a cup. According to those that b'chlal, if you hold that yayin is not biblical. Now, if yayin is biblical, then you're not Yetzias Shul. If yayin is biblical, you're going to have a problem over here. Because if yayin is biblical, then you're not Yetzias Shul by Shmoneh Esrei. You have to be holding your cup. But the Ber Pri Gefen is rabbinic. So you would have to make Mekudash Shabbos first. You hear? If Minat Torah you have to hold the wine, you're not Yetzias and Ma'ariv. You come but the Ber Pri Gefen brach is definitely Derabanan. So you should have to do Mekudash Shabbos first.
For sure.
Like Beis Shammai. So he Taka wants to say that probably the whole wine is Derabanan, and therefore you're Yotze in Shul by Ma'ariv. So when you come home, it's just a Derabanan. So for that, Beis Hillel says, well, the yayin's also Derabanan, and that Tadir. Let's say you didn't go to Shul. So look at the Tzlach in number 3. Number 3, the Tzlach, this is the Noidib Yehuda. He has the same question in number 3. Let's read this quickly. In number 3, the second line. Ha vada, he says, Kiddush hayoim is Dvar Torah. He had basically the same shal as the Pnei Yeshua, that the Mekudash HaShabbos l'chor is biblical, so why doesn't that come first? Omna, Masha ein HaKiddush el al yayin, the fact that you need wine, he quotes the same Toisus, Nistapko at Toisus, Toisus is unsure, Psachim Daf Kufa. If it's Dvar Torah, but V'shittis Roiva Poiskim, the wine is not biblical. Most 90% of Poiskim hold the whole wine thing is Derabanan. There's a Rabbeinu Kleinum, fine, there's a Toisus, there's a few here and there that mention the idea the wine is biblical. Most hold not. The imkain mishahu b'midbar. He says if someone's in the desert, the ein loy shum kois, there's no becher, no pas, vaday shal koponim mutal of chayvis hakiddush shel Torah. There's a mitzvah in Torah to say words and sanctify Shabbos. U'mechuyev l'kadosh even without a cup. So he asks like this: is it a little bit different than the other? How could Beis Hillel? One of Beis Hillel's arguments is that you know why you make hagefen first, because the wine allows the kedusha to be said. He says, what are you talking about? Even without a bracha, you have to say kiddush. Okay, but the main question is the next one. Yeah. Thank you. Even without wine. But v'gam, then now he asks the same shal Pnei Yeshua. Also the second thing that Beis Hillel says wine is Tadir. Bezvachim reish perak Tadir miboil. The Gemara asks Tadir or Mekudash, what's better? Ulafumriyat at first glance, Mashahu Deoraisa is Mekudash against the Derabanan. The Tzlach wants to say that every Deoraisa versus Derabanan is considered Mekudash. It's more sanctified. So what you have over here is the brach of Ber Priagafen is Tadir, but it's rabbinic. The brach of Mekudash HaShabbos is Mekudash. And the Gemara has a question. So the imkain, if so, if yayin yeshla, even the wine has the mile of Tadir, neged zeh kiddush has the mile of Mekudash. So that's his question. His question is not it's not the same as the Pnei Yeshua. It's not as strong. I'll tell you why. The Pnei Yeshua believes a Deoraisa always comes before a Derabanan. Even if the Derabanan is Tadir. It doesn't matter. Deoraisa always comes first. The Mekudash says no. The Deoraisa versus Derabanan is Mekudash versus Eino Mekudash. But if the Derabanan is Tadir, you'll end up in the Gemara Shaila and Zvachim, Tadir versus Mekudash. So Yayin is Tadir. The Mekudash HaShabbos is Mekudash, because it's Deoraisa. It would be a shaila of what you do, but we should at least throw it into the discussion over here. It'll be a third reason to go like Beis Shammai. Instead of being two reasons for Beis Shammai, two for Beis Hillel, there's another reason for Beis Shammai. So Omnam, he says, it must be Yedei Chayves Kiddush Deoraisa Yotze in davening. It must be you Yotze in Mekudash HaShabbos and Ma'ariv. Same answer, Yotze in Ma'ariv. The Imkain Shaper, that's why Beis Hillel makes sense. Ulefizeh, he says a fascinating psak. If a woman who didn't daven Ma'ariv makes Kiddush, she has to flip the order. He says, Lefizeh Yetzel on a Dvar Chadash, in number 3, on the right side, the paragraph of Lefi, Shenoshim, women that it's not their derech to daven Ma'ariv, but Friday night Kiddush, they're chayiv min HaTorah, even though it's bound by time, they're chayiv. If the woman makes Kiddush to herself, Beis Hillel would agree she has to first make Mekudash HaShabbos and then wine like Beis Shammai. Because there's 3 reasons not to go like Beis Shammai. There was the 2 that Beis Shammai said, that the only reason you have wine is because of Kiddush, and number 2, the Kiddush started when Shabbos came in. Beis Hillel had 2 arguments against that, but now there's a 5th argument on the table. Mekudash. This is a Kiddush. The Bnei Noida wants to say, if a woman makes her own Kiddush, she has to flip the order, assuming she didn't daven Ma'ariv. Look at number 5. This is a note from the Shoyel Umeshiv. Rabbi Yosef Sholem Natanzon, the big Rav in Lvov in the 1800s. He says in number 5, Masha Kosev Dvar Chodesh about women. This that the Noida says about women. Lefiani is deity doesn't make sense. He says this Madaplike Beisham Beis Hillel was how to legislate how to make Kiddush. But once you legislate how to do it, you're not going to change based on every circumstance. Avokol shekvar nister. Once it's been legislated, according to Beis Hillel, first wine, then Kiddush, shuv loy chilku, then you don't make the differentiations. Tamid mevarchin on wine first. Dem loy kein yishtanu adin and b'chol yom yom lefi amura. You're also every day. You daven ma'ariv? Yain first. You're doing a bein hashmoshes? First Mekudash Shabbos, right?
Who is this number 5?
The Shoyul Umeshiv, Yosef Shaul Natanson. He was pro machine matzah.
Oh, that's right.
He was the big guy. Yosef Shaul Natanson. He was a big rav in Lvov. Then he says, B'chlal, Tadir Mekudash Atzmoi, even Tadir Mekudash itself is a question the Gemara never solved. Look in the Rambam, V'duk. Now, I don't know why the Shoyul Umeshiv throws that in. The Noid Yehuda is the Tzlach, by number 3, same person. Yechezkel Landau. He wrote the Tzlach stands for Tzion Lenefesh Chai. It's a sefer on Gemara. The Noid Yehuda are the letters that he wrote. Halachic Tshuvas. The Noid Yehuda was well aware that just because the Deraisa is Mekudash doesn't mean it has to go first. But it's another argument to go on the table. It now outweighs Beis Shammai versus Beis Hillel. I think I don't know why the Shalom is bringing this up. The Yehuda is very well aware that
because all of them are trying to make it an issue of Rabbanan versus
no, that's not. It's another spot.
What the Shalom is saying is the Gemara and the Rambam never made it that issue.
But it's a mathematical game over here. Beis Shammai had 2 reasons for them. Beis Hillel had 2 reasons for them. The problem is Beis Hillel's second reason about Tadir is outweighed from the fact that Mekudash Shabbos is Mekudash. So even though the Gemara says it's a stalemate, fine, but it knocks off Beis Hillel's second reason. So that's it. So I don't know.
Only if you hold that there's an issue between Rabbanan and Deraisa.
The Gemara says stalemate. That's all you need.
That's all you need.
That is it. So now Beis Hillel's second reason is Yain comes first because of Tadir. You can't use that because the Mekudash Shabbos is Mekudash. It's a stalemate. Good. That's all you need. Beis Shammai's reasons are both foolproof. Beis Hillel's second reason has a hole in it.
No, because that's only if you say Mekudash is an issue. If the issue is Deraisa and Rabbanan.
Yeah.
That's what Rav was talking about.
Yeah, but that's I hear you. But that's not what the Shalom is asking.
That's what it is.
No, the Shalom is saying I understand Deraisa is Mekudash, but the Gemara never said Mekudash is better.
Because nobody ever talked about in the Gemara and in the Rambam. They never make it an issue of Deraisa and Rabbanan.
Hold on. You're attacking the Noid Yehuda of how does he decide on a whim that Deraisa is considered holier than the Rabbanan. Yeah. The Pnei Yeshua went much further. Pnei Yeshua said the Deraisa is so much greater, even if the Rabbanan's Tadir, it doesn't bother me.
This number 5.
So let's go. Hold on. Quickly join me in number 7. I'm sorry, not number 7. Number 6. Number 6 is the Shaagas Aryeh. The Shaagas Aryeh has a whopper. The Shaagas Aryeh has the same shaila as everybody else. Read in number 6. He says, if you think, in number 6, the Shal Torah yesh lo din k'dim al shal seifrim, if your gut tells you that whenever you have 2 mitzvahs, one's Deraisa, one's Derabanan, that the Deraisa always comes first, so he has the exact same kasha that we saw in the Pnei Yeshua and the Noid Yehuda, im kein hocha, when it comes to Friday night Kiddush, bebirchas hayom, by Friday night tlosa, there are 3 reasons to do yayin first. I'm sorry, there are 3 reasons to do Mekudash Shabbos first. The 2 of Beis Shammai, plus the fact it's Deraisa versus the yayin. The exact same shayla Pnei Yeshua. Ubebirchas yayin ein ayala tarti. It's 3 against 2. It's a mathematical equation over here. Va'amai kodem birchas hayayin lebirchas hayom. Why would Beis Hillel say you make yayin, you make hagefen before Mekudash Shabbos? What's going on? So he wants to prove, the Shaagas Aryeh wants to prove, you'll never believe it. If you have a Deraisa and a Derabanan, the Derabanan is so insignificant compared to the Deraisa, you could do it first. Mm-hmm. It's like the sneezing before the Shema. It's like the Talis and Tefillin.
So it's Pnei Yeshua only...
The opposite.
It's the same reason.
Exactly. Because the Derabanan is so insignificant, it doesn't enter the playing rink.
Wild.
You can't say that the Deraisa comes first because it's holier. That's when you have 2 karbanos, what's holier, right? But if you have a mitzvah versus a devar rishus, you can't say the mitzvah is holier. The other thing's b'chal not holy at all. It doesn't enter the whole discussion.
Interesting. That could be why Rava and the Gemara doesn't talk about it at all, because it's in different categories.
Well, the Pnei Yeshua also holds a different category, but the exact opposite. The Deraisa for sure comes first, no matter how many accolades you'll give to the Derabanan.
But the Shaagas might be talking about why the Gemara doesn't even consider it. Why Rambam doesn't even consider these topics? Doesn't ask these
no one
questions.
mentioned it.
All
Why
the
no one
Shaagas
mentioned
ask
it?
the questions on Rava. Rava never talks about it.
That's
they
the Pella.
that's what he's talking
The Pella is how come the Gemara.
Shaagas might have
The Shaila is Rava happens to get involved in many of these issues. He also has in Megillah and Daf Gimel. He has a whole thing about different mitzvahs in Zvachim in number 1 in Shabbos. Rava gets very involved in the order of operations, but he never discusses this Shaila. What if one's Deraisa and one's Derabanan? What do you do first? He never discussed that. He never discussed this question. Why did he never discuss it? According to the Pnei Yeshua, it's obvious. Of course,
it's just the opposite.
According to Shaagas, it's obvious.
It's obvious, but you don't discuss.
According to the Noda B'Yehuda, it's also obvious. It's a child of Mekudash.
But according to Shaagas, it's obvious, but that's why it's not. It's a non-starter. That's why the Gemara.
According to the Noda B'Yehuda, it's obvious it would be the same shaila as whenever one mitzvah is holier than the other.
But the Shaagas
and then if the Derabanan is Tadir, you go to the shaila of Tadir Mekudash.
It's not in the same ballpark, so it's
right.
It's not worthy of the consideration.
Hold on. So the Shaagas continues. He says, "Wait a second." Who said when you make the bracha Mekudash Shabbos it's biblical? Because you're in Ma'ariv already. The Afal Gavi says, the kaimel on this that we say Kiddush Hayom is Deoraisa. When we say Kiddush is biblical, it's not the nusach of Kiddush dafka the way you say it on the Becher. Min Torah, you could just say anything. Our minhag we say in brachas Kiddush Achek Tiknu. In the beginning of the second base of Mikdash, they made the nusach. Min Torah, you could say however you want. When you say Ata Gidashtu B'Tfilah, or in Mazkir Ezed Dovin Shabbos Saglabach, Min Torah, you could say anything. So he said, wait a second, maybe you're Yetzias in Shul. So if you're Yetzias in Shul, like the Pnei Yeshua and Nebuchadnezzar said, then this whole thing falls off, right? Imken ein raya, you can't prove anything from the fact that the wine comes before Kiddush, that there's no mile to a biblical over rabbinic, because maybe there's nothing biblical there because you were Yetzias Friday night. But he says, no. Beis Hillel said no matter what, even if you're doing a Ben Hashmoshes, even if you didn't daven Ma'ariv. Mikol Makom, Beis Hillel Pascal Mosai Deloel. Beis Hillel said a blanket statement. They didn't say only if you daven Ma'ariv. They said no matter what, Birchas Hayayin comes before Mekudash Shabbos, even if you didn't daven Ma'ariv, and you didn't say anything about the holiness of Shabbos. So for such a person, when you pick up the Becher, when you say Mekudash Shabbos, it's Deraisa. And yet the Gemara doesn't say that that's a reason for it to come first. It must be, said the Shaagas Aryeh. Biblical has no reason to bring it before rabbinic because of how weak the rabbinic is. That's what he taught us. So the Shaagas Aryeh learns that the Gemara is not talking about Yudav and Ma'ariv. The Pnei Yeshua and the Noda B'Yehuda said Fakert. We're Davka talking about Yudav and Ma'ariv. The Noda B'Yehuda said, in fact, if you didn't daven Ma'ariv, or for a woman who didn't daven Ma'ariv, you take a flip it. Yeah. The Shaagas Aryeh says, no, Beis Hillel said they rule everywhere, okay? Even if you didn't daven Ma'ariv. And then you'll ask, the Mekudash Shabbos is biblical? Must be, biblical doesn't count. Look at number 7, it's just the footnotes, recent footnotes that somebody put together on the Shaagas Aryeh. It's a fantastic work. Over here, I think they actually made a little error. In number 7, they put the Tzlach and the Pnei Yeshua together. This guy puts the tzlach in number 3 and the Pnei Yeshua in number 4 together. I think it's a mistake because the tzlach holds a Deraisa versus a Derabanan. The Deraisa is just Mekudash. It doesn't mean it always comes first. If the Derabanan is Tadir, then you go to the Battle of the Bulge of Tadir Mekudash. We saw the Bar Tanura, the Taitas Yamtiv, Taz all say Tadir is better. The Pnei Yeshua, though, said in number 4, a Deraisa always come before Derabanan no matter what. So they say in number 7, Kedivrei Atzlach, the Pnei Yeshua writes the same thing.
It really is the same.
It's not the same at all. Pnei Yeshua says, B'chol, no, no, it's not. It's B'ferish not. I just said it's not.
Nah, but it is.
The Pnei Yeshua said in number 4, even if the Derabanan is Tadir, you do the Deraisa first. According to Noda B'Yehuda, it's not true. If the Derabanan is Tadir, then according to, it's a shail of Tadir versus Mekudash, and according to all those, that Tadir is better would win.
Very few people who say, but
Taz, Chida.
Okay, but still, the Pnei,
Taz,
according to the Tzlach, the majority is still like the Pnei
No,
Yeshua.
according to the Rambam, it would be choose.
No, Rambam doesn't discuss it.
No,
He doesn't even acknowledge the Pnei Yeshua and the Tzlach. That's the whole point.
No, no,
That's
no.
what the Shaagas Aryeh is saying. The Shaagas Aryeh is saying is, according to the Rambam, you'll never even consider the Tzlach and the Pnei Yeshua. That's why he gave you a different
Shaagas Aryeh-
answer.
no.
That's why he says
The Rambam gives
there's
no-
never a discussion between Deoraisa and Derabanan, because Bechlal doesn't even enter the arena. That's the Rambam and the Gemara. That's the whole Shaagas Aryeh's answers here.
He doesn't bring around. The Rambam never discusses
He
Deraisa
brings the
Rabbanan.
Gemara, which is the same thing as
The
the
Rambam holds Mekudash and Tadir remain stalemate.
But nothing to do with Deraisa and Derabanan. You're mixing the Tzlach and saying that it's really a Mekudash and a Tadir. That's not what the Rambam's doing. The only one who holds like that is the Tzlach. He carves out another little angle and tries to say Mekudash and Derabanan is really the same argument as
in
Rabbanan.
number 7, they're putting the tzlach with the pnei.
Because ultimately they're the same.
No. Major. If I can please explain why I feel there's a major difference. According to the tzlach, a Deraisa is Mekudash versus a Derabanan. If the Derabanan is Tadir, if you have a mitzvah Derabanan which is Tadir, and a Deraisa which inherently is Mekudash, what do? You could choose. Tadir Mekudash, you choose. That's the Rambam.
It's not the Rambam. That's what the
No, the Rambam.
The Rambam holds you can
Mekudash,
choose for a totally different reason, not the same reason as the Tzlach.
According to the tzlach,
You're saying the
Rambam
saying so that you could choose, therefore you like the Rambam. You're nothing like the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't even acknowledge
the
that it's...
tzlach would say that the Rambam agrees with him, that a Deraisa is...
Sure you would say that, because he wants to put himself in the Rambam, but he has a totally different way of getting
We
there.
have no idea what the
You have
Rambam holds about
Just
this.
because you have the same... No, the Rambam doesn't even acknowledge that it's a battle between Rabbanan and the Deraisa. Of course
he just
we
never
know.
discusses it, because
Neither does Rava in the Gemara.
That's because the Gemara
Because
never, therefore the Rambam
just like the
can't.
Shaagas Aryeh says, it's so obvious that it's not even the same ball
But
game.
the Noid Yehuda said it's so obvious.
The Noid Yehuda and the Pnei Yeshua are saying the same thing.
How
They're
are they
coming
saying
up
the
with
same
their
thing?
own, because they're both making it an argument of Deraisa and Derabanan that nobody else does, other than the Bartanur and a couple of others. But that's not what the Gemara does. That's not what anybody in the Gemara does, and that's not what the Rambam does. Only the people who do it is that Tzlach and Pnei Yeshua. That they have a little bit of a distinction. He throws it in and tries to say it's the
you
same
agree?
thing.
Okay, you agree. Good, right, good. A bit of a distinction. That's all I needed to hear. Okay. V'ulam, look in number 7, the third line. V'ulam, yesh levasas ra'is ha'shagasar. He says, wait a second. Can you be Yetzias Friday night in shul? Not so fast. The Gemara says in Pesachim, the 5th line in number 7, shetzarich lahazkir b'kiddush Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Gemara says in Pesachim that when you make kiddush, you have to mention zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Friday night, Shemoneh Esrei, there's different versions. There's different versions Friday night. If you say Bayismachu, if you say, we say Zeichel L'Maaseh Bereishis, that's also another thing. But Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim, you don't mention that Friday night. The Gemara in Pesachim is mashma to be Yotze Kiddush, you have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. Which would mean that when you make the bracha on the cup, where you do mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, you're only Yotze there. Ukvar Tomu, the Rishonim and Achronim all ask, how come we don't mention it in Tefillah? But Al Kaponim, since we don't mention it in Tefillah, it could be the Shaagas Aryeh is right. That B'chlal, you're not Yotze Kiddush and davening, if you don't mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. So when you come home and you hold the cup of wine, you're about to make the Kiddush at home, that mamash becomes biblical. And then the Shaagas Aryeh is very powerful. So how come the Gemara in Brachas didn't mention you should do Mekudash first because it's biblical? Must be biblical, makes no difference. There's another thing. There's a din ein Kiddush ela b'makom suda. Kiddush needs to be in the place you eat. V'karasa l'Shabbos oinig. You call to Shabbos oinig. V'karasa is the Kiddush. The oinig is the meal. According to the Rosh, it's a din Deoraisa. Minat Torah can only be Yotze Kiddush if it's by the meal. Rabbeinu Yoina, who was a Rav in Toledo right before the Rosh, holds as the Derabanan. And that's the halach is pretty much like Rabbeinu Yoina. But the Rosh and some others hold it's Minat Torah. So that would be another issue with being Yotze Friday night. According to the Rosh, you're not Yotze Friday night in shul, or wherever you daven Shemoneh Esrei. There's no meal. The issue of Yetzias Mitzrayim is also an issue. And according to those that say you have to do Kiddush ala Yayin, Taisus is Suffolk, Rab Kleinim is Ishraimi, also would say. So there's a lot of issues saying you're Yotze Friday night in Shul. I will tell you the Alter Rebbe holds you are, because the Magen Avraham says you are. The Alter Rebbe passes like the Magen Avraham, you're Yotze Kiddush Friday night in Ma'ariv. But in this footnote of number 7, they want to say, wait a second. It could be Minat Torah, you have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. We don't do that. According to those shittas that you have to have Kiddush b'makom Suda, and that's biblical like the Rosh, it's also a problem. According to any of those opinions, then you really have an issue. Friday night when you come to the table, when you hold that becher, the bracha you're about to make is mamash Minat Torah. Why doesn't that come first? And the Shaagas you would say, it's because it's irrelevant. Irrelevant. According to the Pnei Yeshu and Rebbe Yehuda, the Gemara is talking about you're already Yotze in Shul, which would mean you have to rely on the fact that you don't need to have a Suda. The Alter Rebbe. You have to rely on the fact you don't need to be holding a cup of wine. And you have to rely on the fact that you don't have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim biblically. And then Kiddush Friday night is just Derabanan. Right. So what you have over here so far is 3 opinions. You have the Pnei Yeshu believes any mitzvah Deoraisa automatically comes before Derabanan no matter what. I don't care if the Derabanan is Tadir. The Deoraisa is just so much greater, always first. On the opposite side, you have the Shaagas who says Derabanan is taka so weak, it makes no difference which one you do first. Except for Tadir. Tadir would play a role, but as far as biblical rabbinic doesn't play a role. The Noid of Yehuda, the Tzlach, which you would think probably is the most sensible, is that the Deraisa is considered Mekudash compared to the Derabanan. So then if the Derabanan is more Tadir, you would fall back to the general question of Tadir versus Mekudash, which the Rambam holds is stalemate, and we saw a number of opinions hold Tadir is first. Look at number 8 is Rabbi Kiva Eger. What does he say about this? Imagine you're eating, you had a drink, you need to go to the bathroom. So you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands. You need to make a burn of Farshpayz and an Asher Yotzar. What comes first? The Marshal Paskins, Asher Yotzar always comes first because it's Tadir. The Marshal says, how often do you make a burn of Farshpayz? A few times a day. The Asher Yotzar is Tadir, and therefore the Asher Yotzar comes first. Rabbi Yaakov Emden happens to disagree. He says, why is Asher Yotzar more Tadir? Maybe burn of Farshpayz is more Tadir. You know, I remember when I first learned this as a kid, I thought maybe the pshat in the Marshal is, let's assume someone has to go to the bathroom after every time they eat. Well, sometimes you make a birchas hamazon, sometimes you make a ala micha, sometimes you make burn of Farshpayz. But if after every meal you go to the bathroom, Asher Yotzar will definitely be more Tadir than burn of Farshpayz.
What if you don't go to the bathroom after?
Okay. But it could be more than that. It could be according to Marshal. Burn of Farshpayz you never have to make. Asher Yotzar you have to make. You can't start, right? So going back to the Motzui Tadir thing, that would play a role. But the Yankov Emden believes Nishtazor. He believes that Asher Yotzar is not more Tadir. But the halacha follows the Marshal. The Magen Avraham brings it. Look at number 8. So Rabbi Kiva Eger says like this. Number 8, the 4th word. Achal dover v'nischayev levarach bracha achrona. You ate something and you had to make a bracha achrona. Va'asat tzrachim, and you also went to the bathroom. You do tchila Asher Yotzar, and afterwards bracha achrona. That's the Magen Avraham b'shem the Marshal. But that's talking about burn of Farshpayz. V'im hitel mayim koydem birchas hamazon. What if you have birchas hamazon biblical or Asher Yotzar? Birchas hamazon is Deoraisa, but Asher Yotzar is Tadir. We go like the Marshal. It's a Tadir of a Derabanan versus less frequent Deoraisa. What would you do over here? Tzarechiyun, he says, im lo yaktim, maybe you should do birchas hamazon, which is biblical. Or maybe Mikol Makom Tadir is better. The after, he says, just like the Noid of Yehuda. The question would be, the Deraisa is Mekudash. It's Talia, Neboy, and Shas, and Zvachim, Tadir, Mekudash, which is better? Because Yeshloim, Deraisa compared to Rabbanan is Mekudash. And the Rambam Pashkins, you could do whatever you want. And he quotes the Tzlach, And he also quotes another letter of the Tzlach and the V'tzarchim l'dina.
See, I feel bad, man.
Jumping tracks. Jumping
you
tracks.
didn't know this
You
was
jump on
coming.
this track, then you're off the Rambam, and then you fly into the end of the Rambam.
So,
You jump
Rabbi
tracks.
Akiva
Rambam would
Eger-
never acknowledge your first train track that you were on.
And you
the
didn't
whole
see this
time.
coming. I feel you could still retract your statement.
You should know. Rabbi Akiva Eger, hold on. Rabbi Akiva Eger said, B'chlal not to have mashke on Pesach, even if it's kosher Pesach. So that Tzemach Tzedek said, did Rabbi Akiva Eger give a reason? No. He said mitam komas for a hidden reason. So said that Tzemach Tzedek, if he would have given a reason, I could argue. He gives no reason. If he gives no reason, you have to accept it.
I rest my case. The last time with the no reasons.
Now that you see his reason, oh, that's his reason.
There you go. I'm in good place.
So what do you do over here by the birchas? So Lagabi, the question we started off with, Kriya Shema and benching and Sefira. Kriya Shema for sure comes first. By the way, that's not what people would do. Usually people would bench first. And maybe you'd apply the logic of mitzvah Iveris. That because you, so we said mitzvah because you have a long time. You have an hour and a half. As long as you could eat a little bit more and continue. It's not Iveris. You can eat a little bit more and continue going.
What if you're 20 minutes in, 30 minutes in?
The truth is, no. Maybe it's less Iveris than Kriya Shema. Kriya Shema you want to do before Chatzos, and benching you could eat a little bit every hour, and you'll end up going. You'll end up keep on going.
You ran out of food.
The Shaagas doesn't bring that into the equation.
Nah, it doesn't make sense.
Kriya Shema comes
details.
first.
Those are factual. You're playing stories with facts and.
No, but if benching is considered generally a mitzvah Iveris, because you only when you're ready to bench, you only have a
certain amount of time.
Rabbi Yehudin Gemara Brachas clearly says mitzvah Averis trumps Tadir. But Shaagas doesn't bring Averis. He says Kriya Shema comes first. What about Birchas Hamazon and Sefira? Birchas Hamazon is Deraisa, and it's also Tadir because you have to bench of Shabbos twice. You'll end up getting much more than Sefira. So look, according to everybody, right? According to everyone, Birchas Hamazon should come first. You would think. According to Pnei Shua, for sure it's Deraisa. It's not even. According to the Noidib Yehuda, the Birchas Hamazon is Mekudash, plus it's Tadir. You would think it would come first. Comes the Shaagas Aryeh, and he says like this, you would never expect. He says there's a difference between a Tuesday night Birchas Hamazon versus a Friday night Birchas Hamazon. A Friday night Birchas Hamazon is a Birchas Hamazon that you had to make, because you had to wash. So that Birchas Hamazon happens over 100 times a year, because Friday night, Shabbos day, Yom Tov. So if it's Friday night, you would bench before you do Sefira, because the Birchas Hamazon, not because Birchas Hamazon is Deraisa, because that he said is irrelevant. Yeah. It's because it's Tadir. But a Tuesday night Birchas Hamazon, you never have to make such a Birchas Hamazon. You do have to count Sefira. So I would have expected the Shaagas Aryeh to finish off his letter by saying Sefira should come first.
On the Tadir.
Because the fact Birchas Hamazon's Deraisa is irrelevant, and the fact that Sefira is Tadir, because you have to do it 49 times a year. But he makes a left turn. And I'll tell you, every single time I learn the tshuva, I don't understand why. He ends up saying you could choose. Friday night, Birchas Hamazon first, because it's Tadir, that type of. Tuesday night, Birchas Hamazon, which is only optional. The fact is, it's Motzah. You could have it thousands of times during the year. Motzah is not as powerful as Tadir. But if the Deoraisa is Motzah and the Derabanan is Tadir, stalemate.
That's what he says?
Yeah, but he doesn't bring a Aryeh for it.
Don't you end up with this?
I'm telling you, he makes a left turn.
Yeah, but does he use the words Deraisa and Rabbanan? Because he's discounting that the whole time. He can't be throwing it in here now.
A big Gemara that he based himself on, we said before, is that if you have a Chatas in front of you or a Shlomim, and they're both from today, the Kohen addresses the Chatas first, because it's Mekudash. The Shlomim is around more often. The Gemara says that's Motzui.
Yeah, but
so the Gemara clearly says Mekudash is better than Motzui. It sounds like, but Mekudash and Tadir was a stalemate in the Gemara. But Motzui is much lower. But it's not nothing. It's the Shaagas Aryeh ends up that Sefira you have to do 49 times a year. Tuesday night Birchas Hamazon you never have to do. So if the Deraisa makes no difference, Sefira should come first. But he says stalemate. It sounds like he concedes that since the Deraisa is Motzui.
Who says he's agreeing with
he ends up with stalemate.
That you're putting the Deraisa in the same. That's what means.
Not because of Mekudash. because the fact is it's found very. It's not Tadir. If it's Tadir, then it would be more Tadir than Sefira. It's not. It's Matzah. It happens. It's happenstance. It
Yeah,
happens.
but it's a third
Right,
But what the
category.
Shalom Eshur said about not making it, you don't have it on the Seder. You're telling me so.
Yeah.
Tuesday night, you do this.
I hear.
Shabbos,
Good
you do
point.
that.
Good point. Good point.
But it's a third
That's a good
category.
point.
It's a.
He,
it's a
I don't. I'm telling you,
Tadir,
I
that's
can't
a
explain
matzah.
it.
It's
I
a
can't-
matzah Tadir.
No, I
it's a
can't
hybrid.
explain it because
Because the Tadir is benching. So that you have to
That's
always
Friday
do.
night benching.
No, but the idea of benching is a Tadir.
No,
What
he
type
separates-
of benching is this? It's a matzah benching. So you have a little bit of the Indian of
It's not
of
because of the
Tadir.
Deraisa.
It's definitely not because of the Deraisa, because he does not agree and he discounts and
No,
he takes
no.
out the
Then it doesn't
Yehuda.
come first. But it might be
No,
not
that's why he
at
says
the
you
same
can
time.
ultimately choose.
No. It's
Because it has
Deraisa.
elements of a Tadir for sure
No,
and has
no.
elements of a matzah.
It has elements-
So
I
you
think
can't
the-
say it's more or less
The
than the
Raman-
Tadir of
I hear-
of-
I
of-
hear-
of,
I hear.
The
Sefira
Raman
Haomer.
actually
I
mentions
think
what
the
you
re-
say about a hybrid. The Raman, my favorite.
It's got to be a hybrid because he's
Made up-
he's
I-
not
made
talking
up a
about
hybrid of
he
a
does
Anyhow.
he discounts the idea of saying
I just
kaddish
want to say
in
one.
terms
Okay,
of
fine.
Deraisa.
I'll say one more thing before you go is, so when it comes to Birchas Hamazon versus going Asher Yatzar, according to Pnei Yeshua, Birchas Hamazon first. According to the Noida B'Yehuda and the Rabbi Kiva Eger, it's a shaila of the Birchas Hamazon is Mekudash, the Tadir, it's a shaila. And according to them, the Taz and the Bartanur would say Asher Yatzar first. According to the Shaagas Aryeh, what would he hold? You would think he holds Deraisa makes no difference, and therefore Asher Yatzar because it's Tadir. But the same way he made that left turn by the Sefira, he might say you could choose. I don't know. But interesting, what about if it's Ala Michya versus Asher Yatzar? Is Ala Michya Deraisa? You should know the Rashba and the Tur Paskin, whenever you make Ala Michya, it's Minat Torah.
Nice.
If you're full. If you're full from Lakshan and you make it's Deraisa. It's Deraisa. The Tur Paskin that way. The Rambam and Rabbi Yosef Kaira therefore argue, and they say it's Derabanan.
Always.
Ala Michya is always Derabanan. It's always Derabanan. So now the Alter Rebbe seems to take the opinions Derabanan, but it's not. The fact is the Rashba, the Tur, and others said it's Deraisa. So Rabbi Vadya Yosef paskent, that could be just for Sfardim, but he paskent that because many hold Ala Michya is Deraisa, whenever you have a shayla of Asher Yatzar, Ala Michya should do the Ala Michya first. Why? Because he likes the Pnei
So he
Yeshua.
likes the Pnei Yeshua, that's lach.
A Deraisa always comes first. But the fact is it's a Sophic Deraisa Derabanan, and even if it is a Deraisa, according to Rabbi Kiva Eigen Meduhuda, it's only a shayla of Mekudash versus Tadir. Anyhow, okay, this is a bit of a taste of the interesting.
Yeah. The question is how the chidah can fall somewhat in line. You have to start.